A single mother takes her daughter to work, but the millionaire boss's reaction leaves her in shock. Support the channel by leaving your like and telling us from which city you're watching, and let's dive into our story. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the crisp autumn air of Chicago as golden sunbeams filtered through the sheer curtains of the small studio apartment, casting dancing shadows across the worn hardwood floors. Sarah Grace Mitchell stirred awake to the familiar buzz of her phone alarm, vibrating against the nightstand she'd crafted from milk crates and a wooden board. It was 5:15 in the morning in her tiny studio in Pilsen, where she lived with Lily, her 18-month-old daughter. The morning air carried the sounds of the L train rumbling in the distance and the early commuters beginning their journey through the awakening city. "Good morning, sunshine," Sarah whispered, leaning over the portable crib positioned next to her pull-out couch bed. Lily slept peacefully with her tiny fists curled against her cherubic cheeks, her strawberry blonde curls creating a halo around her head. The toddler had Sarah's bright green eyes and a button nose that crinkled adorably when she smiled. At 24, Sarah carried the weight of single motherhood with a grace that belied her years. Ever since Tyler, Lily's father, vanished upon learning of the pregnancy, she had shouldered alone the responsibility of raising her daughter with dignity and love. Her mother had passed away when Lily was just 6 months old, and she'd never known her father. There was no family safety net, no financial cushion, just Sarah, Lily, and an unwavering determination to build a better life. The studio apartment was small, but Sarah had made it home. She'd painted the walls a cheerful butter yellow and hung handmade curtains from garage sale finds. Lily had her own little corner decorated with colorful alphabet blocks and picture books that Sarah collected from library sales and thrift stores. The morning routine never varied. Change Lily's diaper, prepare a warm bottle while she herself grabbed instant coffee and toast, pack the diaper bag with everything a busy toddler might need, and walk 6 blocks to Mrs. Dorothy Williams' brownstone. At 70 years old, Mrs. Dot had become Sarah's saving grace, watching Lily for a fraction of what daycare centers charged. "Morning, sweet pea," Mrs. Dot would say each day, opening her arms wide to receive Lily. "How'd our little angel sleep?" "Through the night, thank goodness," Sarah would reply, handing over the carefully packed bag. "Her lunch is in the blue container, and she's been asking for her stuffed elephant when she gets fussy." Abim. But this particular Tuesday morning brought an unexpected change. When Sarah knocked on Mrs. Dot's front door, it was opened not by the elderly woman herself, but by her neighbor, Mr. Rodriguez, wearing a concerned expression. "Sarah, honey, Mrs. Dot came down with the flu real bad last night. She's running a high fever and can't watch little Lily today." Sarah's world tilted. She clutched Lily closer, checking her watch. 7:20 in the morning. In exactly 1 hour, she needed to be at the Sterling Mansion in Lincoln Park to begin another day as housekeeper for one of Chicago's most successful tech entrepreneurs. "Is she going to be okay?" Sarah asked, worry creeping into her voice. "Doctor says it's just a nasty bug, but at her age, you can't be too careful. She'll need a few days to recover properly." Sarah leaned against the doorframe, feeling her legs weaken. There was no backup plan. She didn't know anyone else who could watch Lily, and missing work meant risking the job that kept a roof over their heads and food on their small table. "Mama's going to have to take you with her today," she murmured to Lily, who was playing innocently with the zipper on Sarah's jacket. "Please, let everything work out okay." The commute to Lincoln Park took exactly 90 minutes on public transportation from Pilsen. Sarah knew every stop, every transfer, every bump in the route. Seated on the vinyl bench of the bus with Lily on her lap, she watched the city transform from working-class neighborhoods to tree-lined streets of magnificent homes. Lily watched everything with wide, curious eyes, pointing at passing cars and babbling in her unique language. "Ba-ba-ba," she chattered, trying to mimic the rumble of traffic. Some passengers smiled at the cherubic toddler, who responded with her infectious grin. "Today you'll see where Mummy works," Sarah whispered. "But you have to be my very best girl, okay?" super quiet and good. The Sterling estate occupied a full corner lot in one of Lincoln Park's most exclusive areas, where every home competed in understated elegance. Tall iron gates, professionally manicured landscapes, luxury vehicles gleaming in circular driveways. The contrast with Sarah's neighborhood was stark and humbling. James Sterling's property stood out even among such opulence. The contemporary three-story mansion featured clean lines of limestone and glass, surrounded by an architect-designed garden with seasonal plantings and a fountain that created gentle water sounds. The security gate operated via keypad and intercom system. Sarah always entered through the service entrance on the east side. She had keys to the staff door and arrived precisely at 8 o'clock every morning, 30 minutes before James left for his downtown office. It was a carefully choreographed routine they'd maintained for 18 months. The kitchen alone was larger than Sarah's entire apartment. Sleek quartz countertops stretched beneath custom cabinetry, professional-grade appliances gleamed in stainless steel, and an island workspace dominated the center. The space always smelled faintly of the premium coffee James preferred, and the subtle scent of the cleaning products Sarah used to maintain his exacting standards. "Oh my goodness, what am I going to do with you here?" Sarah murmured, surveying the pristine space while Lily craned her neck to take in the unfamiliar surroundings. The toddler immediately tried to wriggle free from her mother's arms, fascinated by the gleaming surfaces and multiple light sources. Sarah quickly improvised a safe play area, using kitchen chairs to create a makeshift enclosure. She scattered the toys she'd brought, a soft teething ring, a fabric book with different textures, and a beloved rubber duck that had been Lily's bath-time companion since birth. "You stay right here while Mommy works, sweetheart. Don't wander off from this spot." Lily nodded solemnly as if she understood completely, grabbed the teething ring, and began shaking it experimentally. The gentle rattling echoed in the quiet kitchen as Sarah exhaled with temporary relief and began her cleaning routine. First, the main living room. It was an impressive space with soaring ceilings, leather furniture in rich cognac tones, a marble fireplace that never showed signs of use, and contemporary art pieces that probably cost more than Sarah's annual salary. The silence was almost oppressive. In 18 months of employment, Sarah rarely saw evidence that anyone actually lived in these rooms. Everything remained perpetually positioned, like a high-end furniture showroom. While vacuuming the area rugs, she could hear Lily contentedly babbling in the kitchen. Periodically, she'd pause to check that all was well, always finding her daughter happily engaged with her simple toys, blissfully unaware of the luxury surrounding her. James Alexander Sterling was an enigmatic employer. He maintained professional distance with all staff, spoke only when necessary, and seemed to carry an invisible weight of sadness. Sarah knew few details about his personal life, only that he'd been widowed 3 years prior and devoted himself entirely to his work. Sterling Tech Solutions had revolutionized data security for major corporations and earned him recognition as one of Chicago's most innovative young CEOs. At 35, James was undeniably handsome in a refined way. Tall and lean, dark hair always impeccably styled, steel-grey eyes that rarely showed warmth, and a bearing that spoke of old money and excellent education. He wore suits that probably cost more than Sarah earned in 2 months and drove a Tesla that whispered silently in and out of the garage. Their interactions followed a predictable pattern. "Good morning, Sarah. I've left some important documents on the study desk. Please be extra careful when cleaning around them." "Good morning, Mr. Sterling. I'll be very cautious. I need the dining room to be spotless today. I'm hosting a video conference with investors this afternoon." "Of course, sir. I'll make sure everything is perfect." That was typically the extent of their communication. Brief, professional, cordial, but distant. Sarah respected this dynamic. Some employers preferred clear boundaries, and as long as she was treated with respect, which she always was, the arrangement worked well. It was nearly 10 o'clock when Sarah heard the sound she'd been dreading. the electronic hum of the garage door opening. James had left at 8:30 as usual, but apparently had forgotten something and returned to retrieve it. Her heart began racing. She rushed to the kitchen to find the play area empty. Lily was gone. "Lily! Lily! Where are you, baby?" she whispered urgently, searching under the island, behind the pantry door, anywhere a curious toddler might have wandered. The sound of James's keys in the front door lock sent panic shooting through her. Following the sound of delighted giggling, Sarah traced her daughter's voice to the living room. Lily had somehow escaped her enclosure and was now sitting cross-legged on the pristine marble floor, having discovered that her vocalizations created fascinating echoes in the high-ceilinged space. She was engaged in an animated conversation with herself, clapping her hands at the acoustic effects. "No, no, no," Sarah breathed, moving quickly to scoop up her daughter, but it was too late. James Sterling entered the living room wearing a charcoal business suit and burgundy tie. He stopped abruptly when he encountered the unexpected scene, a small child sitting amid scattered, colorful toys on his immaculate floor, looking completely at home in his carefully controlled environment. For what felt like an eternity, nobody moved. Lily looked up at the tall stranger with her bright, inquisitive eyes. James stared at the child as if seeing an apparition. Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, feeling her professional life crumbling around her. Then something remarkable happened. Lily smiled. It was the kind of uninhibited, trusting smile that only very young children can produce, full of wonder and innocent confidence in the goodness of the world. She babbled something that sounded like a cheerful greeting and attempted to pull herself upright, using the coffee table for support. And James Sterling, the man who hadn't smiled in 3 years, whose home had become a mausoleum of silence, who had forgotten what the sound of a child's laughter could do to a broken heart, smiled back. It was a small smile, hesitant and surprised, as if he himself was startled by the response. But it was genuine. "Hello there," he said gently, crouching down to the child's eye level. "And who might you be?" Lily clapped her hands and said her clearest word, "Hi," while pointing at him with one chubby finger. "Mr. Sterling, I can explain everything," Sarah began, stepping forward quickly to gather Lily into her arms. "Mrs. Dot, who usually watches her, got sick, and I had nowhere else to leave her." "Wait," James said, raising his hand in a gentle gesture. "What's her name?" "Lily. Lily Mitchell." "Lily," he repeated, as if testing how the name felt. "How old is she?" 18 months, sir." James studied the child, who was now secure in her mother's arms, but continued to regard him with obvious interest. Lily reached out toward him, apparently fascinated by his burgundy tie that caught the morning light. "She likes bright colors," he observed, allowing Lily to touch the silk fabric. "Mr. Sterling, I know bringing Lily here without permission was completely inappropriate. I promise this won't happen again. Mrs. Dot should be better in a few days, and—" "Sarah," he interrupted gently, using her first name for the first time in 18 months of employment. "Take a breath." She stopped talking, surprised by his calm tone. "In a year and a half of working here, have you ever given me reason to complain about your performance?" "No, sir. At least I hope not." "Then why are you assuming I'm going to fire you over an emergency situation?" Sarah found herself speechless. This wasn't the reaction she'd anticipated. "Besides," James continued, looking back at Lily, "she's remarkably well behaved. How long was she playing in here by herself?" "She must have escaped from the kitchen just a few minutes ago. I don't know exactly when. So she was alone in an unfamiliar house and didn't cry or break anything. She just played quietly and explored." His smile widened slightly. "She's quite remarkable." Lily chose that moment to say, "Hi," again, this time adding enthusiastic clapping as if applauding their conversation. "I think she likes you, Mr. Sterling," Sarah said, still processing the unexpected turn of events. "The feeling is mutual," he replied, and there was something different in his voice, a warmth Sarah had never heard before. "If Mrs. Dot needs several days to recover, you're welcome to bring Lily again." "Sir, this house is far too large for one person. A little life in these rooms won't hurt anyone." Sarah looked at the man she thought she knew after 18 months and saw a stranger. Where was the professional distance, the cool formality, the eyes that never seemed to see beyond the immediate task at hand? "Thank you so much, Mr. Sterling. You have no idea how much this means to me." "Just keep her safe and away from anything fragile," he said, returning somewhat to his usual professional tone, but retaining the newfound gentleness. Before leaving, he paused at the doorway and turned back. "Sarah." "Yes, sir." "Thank you." "For what, Mr. Sterling?" "For bringing life into this house." After he left, Sarah remained alone with Lily in the quiet living room, trying to process what had just occurred. The distant, controlled man had revealed a completely different side of himself, and Lily, as if sensing she'd accomplished something significant, laughed aloud and pointed toward the door where James had exited. "What did you do to your boss, little one?" Sarah whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. "He seemed different." Lily simply babbled something unintelligible and pointed toward the front door, as if requesting that the interesting man return to play some more. That same afternoon, long after Sarah and Lily had departed for the day, James Sterling remained in his home office well past his usual hours. His mahogany desk was covered with important documents, quarterly reports, acquisition proposals, partnership agreements, but his mind was elsewhere entirely. He couldn't stop thinking about the child he'd discovered in his living room that morning. The sound of Lily's laughter echoed in his memory, shattering 3 years of deliberate silence in a house that had become his self-imposed prison. James's office occupied the entire 3rd floor of the mansion, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lincoln Park's tree-lined paths. The space was decorated in rich, masculine tones: deep burgundy leather chairs, dark wood paneling, shelves lined with business journals, and architectural coffee table books. A single photograph sat on his desk, himself and Catherine on their wedding day, she 7 months pregnant, both radiant with anticipation. Catherine Sterling had been the love of James's life. They'd met at Northwestern University, fallen deeply in love, and married 4 years later in a ceremony at her family's estate in Lake Forest. She was an interior designer specializing in sustainable residential projects, with a passion for creating spaces that told stories of the families who lived in them. When they discovered the pregnancy, their joy was immeasurable. Catherine immediately began designing the nursery, sketching every detail with the care of someone fulfilling her greatest dream. They'd chosen not to learn the baby's gender, preferring the surprise, but had selected names for either possibility. Grace for a girl, William for a boy. "This baby is going to be the most loved child in the world," Catherine would say, caressing her growing belly. "She'll have all the love and stability that we never had growing up." James had lost his parents in a private plane crash when he was 17, raised afterward by a distant aunt who provided necessities but little warmth. Catherine had grown up in foster care after her mother died of cancer and her father abandoned the family. Both dreamed of giving their child the loving, stable home they'd never experienced. James's company was expanding rapidly during those months. He worked 12-hour days to ensure financial security for the family they were creating. Catherine continued accepting select design projects, but had scaled back considerably in preparation for the baby's arrival. "You're working too much," she chided, massaging his tense shoulders when he arrived home exhausted. "This baby wants a present father, not a workaholic." "Just a few more months and I can ease up," he'd promise. "I want both of you to have everything you deserve." The accident happened on a Thursday evening in October. Catherine was returning from her routine obstetric appointment. At 8 months pregnant, she drove more carefully than usual, taking every precaution. The doctor had told her everything was perfect with both mother and baby. The drunk driver ran the red light at 70 miles per hour, striking Catherine's car with devastating force. She died instantly. Paramedics managed to perform an emergency cesarean delivery, but the baby, they learned it would have been a girl, had suffered internal trauma too severe to overcome. Grace Sterling lived for 2 hours in the neonatal intensive care unit. James reached the hospital still believing in miracles. He held his daughter for several precious minutes before the machine stopped working. She was so tiny, so perfect, with Catherine's blue eyes and wispy blonde hair. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," he whispered to the child who would never respond. "Daddy couldn't protect you and Mommy." The 3 years following the accident became a blur of grief, obsessive work, and self-imposed isolation. James sold the suburban home where he and Catherine had planned to raise their family. The memories were unbearable, and purchased the current mansion. It was larger, more luxurious, and completely empty of the past. He threw himself into work with destructive intensity. Sterling Tech Solutions grew exponentially, but he lost interest in celebrating the success. Financial achievement couldn't fill the gaping hole in his chest. He declined all social invitations, distanced himself from well-meaning friends, and became a ghost version of his former self. The mansion reflected his emotional state, beautiful on the surface, but cold and lifeless within. Sarah had been his 4th housekeeper. The previous 3 had quit, finding the atmosphere too depressing. She remained because she needed the employment and because she respected his silent grieving process. But something had shifted that morning when he found Lily playing in his living room. The child's smile had cracked the armor he'd built around his heart. For the first time in 3 years, he'd felt something beyond emptiness and melancholy. He'd felt curiosity, interest, a spark of what might be joy again. Throughout the afternoon, he found himself remembering the toddler with the bright green eyes and expressive face. He recalled how Lily had reached for his tie, the confident way she'd smiled at a complete stranger, the happy sounds that had filled his silent house. She would be about Grace's age now, he murmured to himself, calculating mentally. Grace would have been born in December. Lily was 18 months old. The proximity of ages wasn't cruel coincidence. It was a sign that perhaps it was time to allow himself to live again. The next morning, James cancelled 2 important meetings and decided to work from home. He told himself it was for practical reasons. He had sensitive calls to make and needed the privacy of his home office. But deep down, he knew he wanted to see Lily again. Sarah arrived punctually at 8, carrying her daughter and a slightly larger bag than the previous day. She seemed nervous, still processing her employer's unexpected reaction the day before. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," she greeted him formally when she found him in the kitchen with his coffee. "Good morning, Sarah, and good morning to you too, Lily." The toddler was in her mother's arms, wearing a pink romper and tiny white sneakers. Upon hearing her name, she turned toward James and immediately brightened, babbling what sounded like an enthusiastic greeting. "Hi, hi," Lily exclaimed, reaching her arms toward him. "I think she remembered you," Sarah commented, surprised. "May I hold her?" James asked, and there was a gentleness in his voice that even he found unfamiliar. Sarah hesitated only briefly before transferring Lily to his arms. The child settled immediately, exploring the buttons of his dress shirt with scientific curiosity. "You're quite the little explorer, aren't you?" James said to Lily, who giggled as if she understood the question perfectly. "You're going to grow up to be a scientist or an adventurer." "She's incredibly curious about everything," Sarah agreed, watching the interaction with fascination. "She wants to touch and examine everything she sees." "Sign of intelligence," James noted. Curious children become innovative adults. Lily had discovered the pen in his shirt pocket and was attempting to extract it. James allowed her to play with it while keeping it secure. "Careful, that's not a toy," he said gently. "But you can hold it for a moment." Sarah observed the scene in silence. There was something almost paternal about how James interacted with Lily. His movements seemed natural, his protective instincts automatic, as if he instinctively knew how to hold a small child. "Mr. Sterling," she said carefully, "may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." Do Do you have experience with children? The question hit James like a physical blow. For a moment, his expression closed off, returning to the familiar mask of control. Lily sensed the tension and looked at him with concern, touching his face with her small hand. "Sad?" she asked with her limited vocabulary but unlimited empathy. The innocent question from the child completely dismantled James's defenses. How could an 18-month-old perceive emotions he'd been trying to hide for 3 years? "No, sweetheart," he said softly, forcing a smile. "I'm not sad." But he was lying, and somehow Lily knew it. She leaned forward and gave him a wet kiss on his cheek, the way small children do when they want to comfort someone who's hurting. The simple, pure gesture broke something inside James. He felt his eyes well up and had to blink several times to maintain composure. "Thank you, Lily," he whispered. "You're a very special little girl." Sarah watched the entire exchange with her heart aching. There was something deeply moving about how her employer interacted with Lily, as if the child were healing an old, deep wound. "Mr. Sterling," she said gently, "I didn't mean to pry with my question." "You weren't prying," he replied, handing Lily back to her mother. "It's just that there are things in my past that are difficult to discuss." "I understand completely." James looked at the two of them for a long moment. Mother and daughter, connected by a love that was visible and pure. Sarah was naturally beautiful. Light brown hair that shone even when pulled back in a practical ponytail, expressive green eyes, fair skin without makeup. But what drew attention most was the dignity with which she carried her responsibilities. "I need to make some calls," he said finally. "Please make yourselves comfortable." Before heading to his office, he stopped at the kitchen doorway. "Sarah?" "Yes, sir." "Thank you." "For what, Mr. Sterling?" "For bringing life into this house." Over the following days, a new routine established itself in the mansion. James cancelled 2 more business trips, citing urgent local matters requiring personal attention. In reality, he couldn't convince himself to leave, knowing that Lily would be there. Every morning after breakfast, he spent 20 minutes playing with the child before retreating to his office. Lily quickly learned to expect him, becoming restless around 8:30 and beaming when she heard him coming down the stairs. "Hi, hi," she would call out, clapping whenever she saw him. "Good morning, princess," became his standard greeting. "How did you sleep?" Lily would respond with a mixture of babbles and gestures that only she understood, but which sounded like a complete report on her dreams and nighttime adventures. Sarah watched these interactions with growing admiration. The cold, distant man she'd known was being replaced by someone who smiled genuinely, spoke with a soft voice, and demonstrated infinite patience with Lily's antics. "She makes him different," Mrs. Dot commented when Sarah told her about recent developments. The elderly woman had recovered from her flu, but James insisted that Lily continue visiting the mansion. "Different how?" Sarah asked. "More human, more alive. Children have that power to awaken the best in people." On Thursday of that week, James did something that surprised even himself. He bought toys for Lily. Not simple toys, a complete educational set with stacking blocks, textured fabric books, a small rocking horse, and a colorful toy piano. "Mr. Sterling," Sarah said when she saw the shopping bags, "this is incredibly generous, but it wasn't necessary." "Lily is growing," he explained, seeming slightly embarrassed. "She needs appropriate stimulation for cognitive development." Lily was thrilled with the new gifts. She settled in the middle of the living room, surrounded by colorful toys, testing each one with the seriousness of a researcher. When she discovered the piano made different sounds when she pressed the keys, she laughed delightedly and began composing her first symphony, a chaotic mix of sounds that made perfect sense to her. "Music!" she declared, applauding her own performance. "Very talented," James praised, sitting on the floor beside her. "You're going to be a wonderful pianist." Sarah observed the scene from the sofa, feeling something strange stirring in her chest. It wasn't just gratitude for the kind treatment Lily received. It was something deeper, more dangerous. She was beginning to see James not just as an employer, but as a man, and that frightened her. "May I ask a question?" Lily said suddenly, looking directly at James. Both he and Sarah were surprised. It was the first time Lily had formed a complete question. "Of course, Princess. You can ask anything you want." "Daddy?" Lily asked, tilting her head with genuine curiosity. The silence that followed was deafening. James paled. Sarah felt her face burn with embarrassment, and Lily continued looking at him, waiting for an answer to her innocent question. "Lily, no," Sarah said quickly. "Mr. Sterling isn't your daddy. He's Uncle James." "Uncle Jay," Lily repeated, attempting to pronounce the name and smiling with satisfaction at her effort. James said nothing for a long moment. The child's question had touched a wound he thought had healed, but it wasn't pain he felt. It was something almost like hope. "Uncle James is fine," he said finally, forcing a smile. "You can call me that." That night, after Sarah and Lily had departed, James climbed to the second floor of the mansion and opened a door that had remained closed for 3 years. It was the nursery he and Catherine had prepared for Grace. The pale yellow walls, the cherry wood crib, the dresser filled with tiny clothes that were never worn. For 3 years, this room had been a symbol of everything he'd lost. But that night, for the first time, he managed to enter without feeling only pain. He felt possibility. "Catherine," he whispered to the emptiness, "I think it's time to let someone in again." The following weeks brought a gradual but noticeable change in the mansion's atmosphere. James began working from home more frequently, always finding professional justifications for his presence. Sarah noticed he appeared in the kitchen more often, always offering assistance or simply chatting while she worked. "Sarah," he said one Friday morning while she organized the pantry, "may I ask you a personal question?" Lily played on the floor beside them, stacking colored blocks with absolute concentration. "Of course, Mr. Sterling." "James," he corrected gently. "When we're talking like this, you can call me by my first name." The request surprised her. In 18 months of employment, he'd always maintained complete formality. "All right, James." The name felt strange on her tongue, but not unpleasant. "Did you always want to be a mother so young?" The question was intimate, but the way he asked didn't feel invasive. "Not exactly," Sarah answered honestly. "Lily wasn't planned, but from the moment I knew I was pregnant, I knew I'd love her unconditionally. And her father." Sarah hesitated before responding. It was a painful subject, but something in James's expression encouraged her to be frank. "Tyler wasn't ready for the responsibility. When he learned about the pregnancy, he disappeared. I haven't seen him since. That must have been incredibly difficult." "The first few months were the hardest," she admitted. "But Lily gave me strength to continue. She's my motivation to be better every day." James watched Lily, who had successfully stacked 5 blocks and was now applauding her achievement. "You're an extraordinary mother, Sarah." "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." There was a moment of comfortable silence. Lily crawled over to James and offered him a red block, as if wanting to include him in her game. "Thank you, Lily," he said, accepting the gift seriously. "I'll treasure this block." Lily laughed and returned to her toys, satisfied with making her friend happy. "May I ask you a question too?" Sarah said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Certainly. Did you always want to own your own company?" James seemed surprised by the question, but not annoyed. "Actually, no. When I was younger, I had different plans, but sometimes life takes us down paths we never expected." "What kind of plans?" "I wanted to be a teacher, history specifically. I loved the idea of helping young people understand the past so they could build a better future." Sarah tried to imagine James in a classroom and found the image surprisingly appealing. "What changed?" "Life changed. I lost my parents early, needed to support myself, and the business world attracted me because of the financial stability it offered." "Do you regret it?" "Regret is a strong word. Let's say sometimes I wonder how things might have been if I'd made different choices." There was a melancholy in his voice that Sarah recognized. It was the same she sometimes felt when thinking about how her life might have been different if Tyler hadn't run from his responsibilities. Lily chose that moment to stand up by holding onto the chair leg and take her first wobbling steps toward James. It was only 3 steps, but they represented an important milestone. "She's walking," Sarah exclaimed, emotional. "Lily, you did it," James said, catching her when she reached him. "What a smart girl." Lily laughed with delight at all the attention and applause she received for her accomplishment. "The first time I've seen her take her first steps," Sarah murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "What did you say?" James asked. "Nothing, just it's special that you witnessed this moment. These milestones are important." There was something in Sarah's voice that made James look at her more carefully. He realized then that she'd become emotional, not just about Lily's achievement, but about having someone to share the moment with. "Do you feel lonely sometimes?" he asked gently. The question caught Sarah off guard. It was something she rarely admitted, even to herself. "Sometimes," she replied quietly. "But Lily fills so much of my life, and I have Mrs. Dot, who's like a grandmother to her. And you, your personal dreams, your desires. My dreams now are all about Lily. Seeing her grow up healthy and happy is all that matters. And before Lily, what were your dreams?" Sarah smiled nostalgically. "I wanted to study elementary education. I always loved children and dreamed of being a kindergarten teacher. But life took a different turn. It's never too late to pursue dreams. With Lily small and needing to work to support her, it's hard to think about studying." "I understand." They fell silent for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Lily had fallen asleep in James's arms, exhausted by the excitement of her first steps. "And you?" Sarah asked eventually. "What are your dreams now?" The question caught James off guard. It had been so long since someone asked him about dreams that he'd forgotten how to answer. "Honestly, 3 years ago I'd stopped dreaming, but lately I've been thinking maybe it's time to start again." "What kind of dreams?" James looked at Lily sleeping in his arms, then at Sarah. "Simple dreams. Having a reason to smile every day, hearing children's laughter echoing through the house, having someone to share important moments with." There was something in the way he said this that made Sarah's heart race. Was he talking about them? The following week, Lily woke up with a fever. Sarah panicked. It was the first time her daughter had been seriously ill beyond minor colds. Her temperature was 102 degrees, and the toddler cried inconsolably. "Mrs. Dot, what should I do?" she asked the elderly neighbor desperately. "Take her to the emergency room, honey. Fever in little ones isn't something to mess with." Chicago General's emergency room was packed as always. Sarah spent 5 hours waiting with Lily in her arms, the child alternating between crying and restless sleep. The environment smelled of disinfectant, and there was constant noise from conversations, children crying, and overhead announcements. That's when her phone rang. It was James. "Sarah, Mrs. Dot called me. How is Lily?" "We've been at the hospital for hours," she replied, her voice exhausted. "She has a high fever and I don't know what to do." "Which hospital?" "Chicago General." There was a pause on the line. "Listen, I'm going to call my personal physician. Dr. Morrison is a pediatrician and excellent. I can get an appointment for today." "James, I can't afford a private doctor. I'll pay for it. Don't worry about that. I can't accept." "Lily is suffering, Sarah. Put your pride aside and let me help." An hour later, they were at the private clinic. Dr. Morrison examined Lily thoroughly and diagnosed a throat infection. Nothing serious, but requiring proper treatment. "It's viral. It'll pass in a few days," the doctor explained. "I'll prescribe a fever reducer and a mild anti-inflammatory to ease the symptoms." "Doctor," James said, "what kind of health insurance would be appropriate for a child Lily's age?" Sarah looked at him in surprise. "There are several good plans with excellent pediatric coverage," the doctor replied. "I can recommend some options." In the car, driving home, Sarah tried to protest again. "James, you can't pay for health insurance for Lily. It's too expensive." "I can and I will," he said firmly. Lily is important to me, Sarah. Let me take care of you both. Why? Because that's what people who care about each other do. The word care echoed in Sarah's mind. What exactly did James feel for them? Lily slept soundly that night, her fever finally breaking with the medication. Sarah stayed awake watching her, thinking about James's kindness, the care he showed, how he'd become such an important part of their lives. The next day, Lily was much better, but still a bit cranky. James appeared in the kitchen with a gift, a children's storybook with colorful illustrations. For Lily to enjoy while she recovers, he explained. Book, Lily exclaimed, recognizing the object and clapping. That's right, it's a book. Would you like Uncle James to read to you? Lily nodded vigorously and settled into his lap while James opened to the first page. It was the story of a little duck who got lost in the forest and found a new family. Once upon a time, there was a duckling named Sunshine, he began, using different voices for each character. Sarah watched the scene with her heart tight. There was something deeply moving about seeing this powerful, successful man reading children's stories with the same seriousness he devoted to business. You're very good with children, she commented when he finished the story. I always wanted to be a father, he said simply, then seemed to realize what he'd revealed. I mean, you always wanted to? James was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to share. My wife was pregnant when she died, he said finally. We were going to have a daughter. The revelation hit Sarah like lightning. Suddenly, many things made sense. The sadness in his eyes, the empty house, the way he'd connected immediately with Lily. I'm so sorry, she said softly. I had no idea. It's not something I talk about often. How long ago? 3 years this month. Lily, oblivious to the heavy conversation of the adults, had taken the book and was flipping through pages, pointing at pictures and making comments in her private language. She would be Lily's age now, James said, watching the child. What was she going to be named? Grace. Sarah felt her heart clench. She imagined the pain of losing a pregnant wife, the dream of fatherhood brutally interrupted. James, she said, may I ask you a difficult question? Of course. When you look at Lily, do you see your daughter who wasn't born, or do you see her for who she is? It was a brave question, but necessary. James thought carefully before answering. At first, I'll admit I sometimes saw Grace, but over time, Lily earned her own place in my heart. I began to love her for who she is, not what she represents. And me? Sarah asked, surprising herself with her boldness. What do I represent to you? James looked directly into her eyes. You reminded me that I'm still alive, that I can still feel joy, hope, love. The word love hung suspended in the air between them. Lily chose that moment to slip from James's lap and crawl to her mother, offering her the book. Mommy read? She asked. Of course, sweetheart, Sarah said, still processing the conversation they'd just had. But as she read to Lily, her hands trembled slightly, and she knew it wasn't from the emotion of the story. 2 weeks later, during a casual conversation with Jennifer, an acquaintance who worked at another mansion in the same neighborhood, Sarah heard something that chilled her blood. I heard your boss has been asking about private schools for young children, Jennifer mentioned while they waited for the bus. What do you mean? Martha, who works next door, overheard him on the phone asking about enrollment for a 2-year-old. And he also spoke with a lawyer who specializes in family law. Sarah's heart raced. Are you sure? Martha heard it with her own ears. Sarah, don't you think it's strange for a single man to suddenly take such interest in a child who isn't his? Jennifer's words resonated in Sarah's mind during the entire trip home. Could it be possible that James was planning something related to Lily? The idea that he might try to take her daughter terrified her. The next morning, she arrived at work watching James's every movement, every word, looking for signs of hidden motives. When he approached to play with Lily, as he always did, she quickly took the child in her arms and moved away. Is everything all right? He asked, noticing the change in behavior. Everything's fine, she lied. Throughout the morning, Sarah kept Lily close to her, not allowing her to play alone or interact with James as usual. He tried several times to approach, but she always found an excuse to take Lily to another room. "Sarah," he said finally at lunchtime, "did something happen? You're different today." "Nothing happened. You've barely let Lily out of your arms today. Since when does she need supervision to play in the living room?" The question sounded accusatory to Sarah, confirming her suspicions. "I just think it's better to keep her close," she replied coldly. "Why?" "Because she's my daughter." The emphasis on the word "my" didn't go unnoticed by James. "Of course she is. I never said otherwise." "You didn't say it, but what, Sarah? Tell me what you're thinking." She looked at him for a long moment, debating internally whether she should confront him directly. "I heard you've been asking about schools for children and talking to family law attorneys." James's expression changed completely. "Who told you that? Does it matter? Is it true?" "Partially," he admitted. "But it's not what you're thinking." "Then explain what it is." James ran his hand through his hair, seeming to search for the right words. "The school is for a social project my company is funding, a community daycare for employees' children." "And the lawyer?" "That's more complicated." "Complicated how?" "I consulted her about legal possibilities related to Lily's welfare." Sarah's blood froze. "What kind of possibilities? Like becoming her official godfather or guardian in case of emergency? Things to ensure she always has support, even if something happens to you." Sarah was shocked. That wasn't what she'd expected to hear. "Without consulting me. I was gathering courage to talk to you about it, but then I thought it would be better not to bring up the subject without being sure you'd accept." James," she said, using his first name for the first time in days, "may I ask you a direct question?" "Of course. Do you have ulterior motives regarding Lily, or regarding me?" James looked directly into her eyes. "My intentions are as honest as possible, Sarah. I've grown attached to you both in a way I didn't expect. Lily awakens in me a paternal instinct I thought I'd lost forever. And you show me every day what it means to be a person of integrity and courage." "That doesn't answer my question. Do you want a direct answer?" "Yes." "Then yes, I have intentions regarding you both. The intention to protect you, to be part of your lives, to offer everything I can so you'll be happy. If those are ulterior motives, then I'm guilty." The brutal honesty in his voice completely disarmed Sarah. There was sincerity in those words that was impossible to fake. "You don't have to answer now," he continued. "I know I made mistakes, that I should have talked to you before taking any initiative, but I want you to know that never, at any moment, would I think of separating you from Lily. The strength of love between you is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen." Lily, who had been quiet during the entire serious conversation, chose that moment to crawl to James and try to climb up his leg, babbling, "Uncle Jay," repeatedly. "See," he said, picking up the child. "Even Lily knows I'm not a threat." For the first time that day, Sarah allowed Lily to stay in his arms without interfering. She watched the natural interaction between the two and felt guilty about her suspicions. "I'm so sorry," she said finally. "I should have talked to you instead of believing gossip. The people who spread that gossip care about you, Sarah. They were trying to protect you. I can't blame them for that. Still, it wasn't fair to you." They remained silent for a moment, processing everything that had been said. "So," James said eventually, still holding Lily, "do you still want to look for another job?" "No," she replied quickly, "if you still want me here." "Of course I want you here. And about the godfather issue?" Sarah looked at Lily, who was happy in James's arms, and felt she might be missing a unique opportunity for her daughter. "Can we talk about it?" she said. "Calmly, without pressure?" "We can talk about anything," James said. "That's how true friendship works." Both smiled, and the tension of recent weeks began to dissipate. But deep down, both knew that conversation had revealed feelings deeper than simple friendship, feelings neither was ready to admit openly. 4 months passed since the trust crisis, and life in the mansion had acquired a cozy routine. Lily, now almost 2 years old, ran through the house as if she owned it, knew every corner, and had toys scattered throughout every room. James had officially become her godfather in a simple ceremony at City Hall, complete with a small celebration at home afterward. "Godfather Jay!" Lily would shout whenever she saw him, running to hug his legs with the force of a child in love with life. The relationship between Sarah and James had also evolved. They talked for hours about various subjects, shared informal meals, and there was a growing intimacy between them that both pretended not to notice. One Friday afternoon, Lily was taking her nap when James found Sarah on the back terrace, gazing at the garden with a thoughtful expression. "May I join you?" he asked. "Of course." They sat side by side on the wooden bench James had installed especially for Lily, but which had become the adult's favorite conversation spot. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How life has changed," Sarah replied. "A year ago I could barely imagine a future beyond working and caring for Lily. Now what? Now I have dreams again. Lily has a godfather who loves her, health insurance, opportunities I could never give her alone, and I..." "You what?" Sarah looked at him, gathering courage. "I fell in love." James's heart stopped for a moment. "With whom?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "With you." The silence that followed was charged with emotion. James took Sarah's hand in his. "I fell in love too," he said softly. "With both of you. With this family we built without realizing it. James, we're very different. You're a successful businessman. You're the most courageous woman I know," he interrupted. "You're a dedicated mother, a person of integrity, someone who taught me that true love has nothing to do with money or social status. People will talk. Let them talk. What matters is what we feel and how we can be happy together." Sarah smiled, feeling tears of happiness in her eyes. "Lily will be thrilled. She already calls you Daddy when she thinks we're not listening." "Really?" "Last week she told Mrs. Dot she has Mommy, Daddy J, and lots of toys." James laughed, a sound that had become common in recent months, but still made Sarah's heart race. "May I kiss you?" he asked. "Lily is napping." Children need to see healthy demonstrations of love when they wake up." They kissed gently, there on the garden bench, while the afternoon sun painted everything around them in golden tones. It was a kiss full of promises and hope for the future. "Mommy! Daddy!" Lily's voice separated them. The child had awakened and found them, now clapping and jumping with joy, as if she knew exactly what she'd missed. "How did she find us?" Sarah asked, laughing. "Child instinct," James said, picking up Lily. "Kids know when something special is happening." "Family!" Lily declared, pointing to all three of them. "My family!" 6 months later, in an intimate ceremony at City Hall, Sarah Grace Mitchell became Sarah Sterling. Lily was the flower girl, wearing a pink dress she'd chosen herself at the store, insisting she needed lots of sparkles for the special occasion. The honeymoon was at a family resort in Michigan, where Lily could play on the beach for the first time in her life. James taught her to build sandcastles while Sarah watched from under the umbrella, still unable to believe this life was real. "Daddy, look!" Lily would shout, showing shells she found in the sand. "Treasure!" "Very beautiful, princess," James would respond with the seriousness of someone examining precious gems. "We'll keep them in our special collection." When they returned to Chicago, the mansion had been remodeled. Grace's former nursery became Lily's room, decorated in her favorite colors, pink and yellow, filled with books, educational toys, and a rocking horse she'd specifically requested from Santa, who coincidentally had the same handwriting as James. "My room!" Lily exclaimed upon seeing the space for the first time, running to hug the rocking horse. "Thank you, Daddy." The word Daddy had become natural, without forcing, without pressure. Lily simply started calling him that, and no one corrected her, because it felt right. Sarah enrolled in a night program for elementary education at a community college that James insisted on paying for. Education is an investment in our family's future, he argued when she tried to refuse. Lily will be proud to have a teacher for a mother. Evenings became special moments. While Sarah studied at the living room table, James played with Lily or read her stories. After the child fell asleep, they shared intimate moments on the couch, talking about their day, making plans for the future, building dreams together. "Sometimes I feel like I'm dreaming," Sarah confessed one of those nights, nestled in her husband's arms. "That I'll wake up in my tiny apartment, hearing Lily cry and worrying about bills." "That won't happen," James said, kissing her forehead. "This is our reality now, our family, our life. Don't you miss it? Your life before, when it was just you?" "Never," he replied without hesitation. "You both brought me back to life. This house was a cold museum before Lily started scattering toys everywhere, and you started filling the kitchen with the smell of homemade cookies." 2 years after the wedding, when Lily turned 4, came news that would complete the family's happiness. Sarah was pregnant. "Baby!" Lily shouted when she found out, kissing her mother's still small belly. "My little brother!" "It could be a little sister too," Sarah corrected, laughing. "No, it's a brother. I know," Lily insisted with the absolute certainty of children. James was moved beyond words. This time, he would accompany the entire pregnancy, be present at every appointment, feel every kick, set up the baby's room together with Sarah. It would be different. It would be right. "I'm scared," Sarah confessed one night, caressing her 6-month belly. "Of what?" "That something will go wrong, that we'll lose this baby like you lost Grace." James held her tight. "We won't lose this baby. This time will be different. This time we'll be together every moment." "What if Lily gets jealous? Lily can barely wait to be a big sister. She's already set aside some toys that the baby can use when he grows up." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Lily kissed her mother's belly every morning and night, talked to the baby, and promised to teach him important things, like tying shoes and building sandcastles. William Sterling was born on a sunny spring morning. Lily was at school when Sarah went into labor, and James called Mrs. Dot, now officially the family's adopted grandmother, to pick her up. "Daddy, where's my little brother?" Lily asked as soon as she arrived at the hospital, wearing her school uniform and carrying a drawing she'd made especially for the baby. "He's right here, Princess," James said, taking her to the room where Sarah was resting with William in her arms. Lily approached on tiptoe, as if seeing something very precious and fragile. "Hi, little brother," she whispered. "I'm Lily. I'm going to take care of you forever." William opened his grey eyes, as if he understood perfectly his big sister's promise. "He's beautiful," Lily said to Sarah. "Just like Daddy, but tiny." "Do you want to hold him?" Sarah asked. Lily nodded seriously and sat in the chair beside the bed. James helped position William in her small arms. "Hi, William," she said with all the solemnity in the world. "I brought you a drawing. It's our family. Mommy, Daddy, me, you, and Grandma Dot. When you grow up, I'll teach you to draw too." James watched the scene with tears in his eyes. His family was complete. Grace and the first baby would have loved these children, would have rejoiced in the happiness he'd found after so much suffering. 5 years later, on a Saturday morning, the Sterling mansion vibrated with the sound of children playing. Lily, now 9, was teaching William, 5, to ride a bicycle in the back garden. Sarah graduated with her teaching degree and working at a school that she and James had helped establish for underprivileged children, watched from the terrace while holding their youngest, Grace, 2 years old, a blessed surprise who arrived to definitively complete the family. "Mummy, William can pedal by himself," Lily shouted, running to show her brother's achievement. "Very good, champion," Sarah praised, and William smiled proudly, missing a few teeth and with his face dirty from playing. James arrived from the grocery store carrying bags of food for the family barbecue that had become their Saturday tradition. Mrs. Dot always came, along with some close friends they'd made over the years. "Daddy!" all 3 children shouted in unison, running to hug him. "My loves," he said, trying to hug everyone while balancing the shopping bags. "How are my treasures today?" "William learned to ride a bike," Lily announced. "Grace said Papa this morning." William added, always eager to share important news. "And Mommy made chocolate cake," Grace completed with her tiny voice. James looked at Sarah, who watched him from the terrace with a smile that still made his heart race after all these years. "How did I get so lucky?" he asked, climbing the steps to kiss her. "It wasn't luck," she said, returning the kiss while Grace clapped between them. "It was love, love that transforms, that heals, that builds families where there was once only loneliness." That night, after the children fell asleep, James and Sarah sat on the same garden bench where they declared their love years before. The full moon illuminated the yard where colorful toys were scattered, evidence of a house truly lived in and loved. "Do you remember," Sarah said, "when I was desperate because Mrs. Dot got sick and couldn't watch Lily?" "I remember," James replied, intertwining his fingers with hers. "The best day of my life. The day I found my family. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't gotten the courage to bring Lily that day. We would have found each other another way," he said with certainty. "People who are meant to love each other always find a way." From the children's room came a whisper. "Mommy, I had a nightmare." "That's William," Sarah said, getting up. "I'll go to him." "Let's go together," James said. "That's what families do, face nightmares together." They went upstairs to find William sitting in bed with tears in his eyes. Lily had already woken up and was comforting her brother, explaining that monsters aren't real, they're just imagination. "Come here, champ," James said, picking him up. "Want to sleep in Mommy and Daddy's room tonight?" William nodded, still sniffling. "Can I come too?" Lily asked. "And me," Grace said from her crib, awakened by the noise. "Of course," Sarah said, laughing. "Family night in the big bed." They all settled in the king-size bed. Sarah in the middle with Grace nestled in her arms, William snuggled against James on the right, and Lily telling quiet stories to chase away the last remnants of her brother's nightmare. "This is my wealth," James whispered in the darkness, listening to the peaceful breathing of the people he loved most in the world. "My true fortune." In the mansion that was once silent and cold, now echoed laughter, games, animated conversations, and sounds of a happy family. Lily had brought the first light when she was just an 18-month-old baby. That light multiplied, spread, illuminated every corner of the house and the hearts of all who lived there. And so, in a story that began with a desperate mother needing to bring her daughter to work, a home was built where love conquered loneliness, where hope replaced despair, and where a family formed not through blood ties, but through the invisible threads of affection, mutual care, and the daily choice to love. The light that Lily brought that Tuesday morning never went out again. On the contrary, it shone brighter and brighter, illuminating the path to a future full of possibilities and joys, yet to be lived. Thank you for following this story of love, family, and second chances. If you were moved by Sarah, James, and Lily's journey, please leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment touched your heart the most. Until the next story, and remember, true love always finds a way to transform lives.